What's up, guys? You can see the empty trailer behind me. That means it's time to fill it with our next project. Now, I'm out here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Those of you who watch the channel know that I'm in Pennsylvania, but there's a big difference between Eastern PA, where I'm from, and Western PA. And that big gap is filled with trees. Rolling, stubby Appalachian mountains, trees, and as my friend Tony said, lots of potholes. Now, this isn't my bike like the last Virago one was. This is my friend Tony's. He's been looking at one for a while. He actually owns a car dealership out here in Pittsburgh, and he's been looking for an old BMW Airhead to turn into a project for a while. Let's check it out. And here it is. This is a 1979 BMW R65. So it's not a huge one, right? It's the 650. But what that means is that you can get these a little bit easier and you can get them a little bit cheaper. And as you guys can see, this one is, I mean, it's in great shape. Tony's a really good friend of mine. Him and I have known each other for a few years. I think it was our wives that first introduced us, right?
Yeah, they met back in college up at IUP a few years ago. We actually became good friends, and then Jim and Emily actually ended up being the officiants in our wedding back in 2021, and we just celebrated our second wedding anniversary because we'd had the COVID wedding, of course. Jim and I have been talking for a few years about getting one of these projects going, and it's just hard to find one, especially one that runs and isn't a total rod bucket.
So 1979, this is a twin shock version. So you can see one shock on that side, one shock on that side. They made them after this, a few years later, they made them a monoshock. So just on this side, we have one bigger shock going up. That might be a preview for what I'm planning in terms of this build, but these old Airheads are getting pretty desirable. One thing that's nice about the R65 is it's not the big boy, right? It's a 650, so it's got plenty of power, but it's not as desirable as like the R100 or R75 or R80. So you can get these a little bit less expensive. You're not going, you know, fist over buckets, spending money to get something that you're just going to chop up anyway.
I bought this off a guy. He had it since the late 90s, and it only has 30,000 miles on it, so I thought it'd be a good candidate.
Tony said that this only has 30,000 miles on it. For those of you that ride new bikes, that may seem high, but for these old Airheads, that's nothing, especially these smaller 650s like this, which, you know, these things haven't been, you know, wrung out all day on highways. And you can see this one hasn't even really been modded at all. That's sort of the sad part, right? Is that BMW guys hate when you talk about chopping these things up.
It's the same with the cars, the classic cars. People want, you know, everything to be original. Well, that seems to all be going by the wayside. People want it to run good, have air conditioning, have a radio. Probably similar with the bikes, though. You get the enthusiasts and you get people that actually want to have something to use and enjoy and show.
This isn't just a free plug for your dealership, but Tony actually has a car dealership, Auto Sport Co. There's two locations, one in Indiana and one here in Pittsburgh. Yep. And you deal with nearly all Mazda Miatas, right? And Honda Civics.
We have a range of Mazda Miatas for sure, but we do a lot of Mustangs, Corvettes, Miatas, and then we usually keep a few classics in stock, and up at the other store, they pretty much do all classic Corvettes.
You paid a great price for it. How much did you pay for it? Like $1,100, $1,200?
Yeah, it was $1,200.
And it runs and drives, guys. $1,200, runs and drives. This is pretty sweet, man. Why don't we get it loaded up in the old trailer?
Yeah, sounds like a wiener.
What?
I had to throw that in.
That's amazing. Oh my God. Here you go. Bingo bango.
Make like a Winnebago and motor home.
Tony gets paid for his sayings. She's a wiener.
Got to pay for this bike somehow.
Make like a Winnebago and motor home.
I divide my motorcycle builds into 3 stages. The first stage is planning and strip down. The second is the rough build, fabrication, and setup. The third is the second disassembly, application of all the finishes, painting, powder coating, and so forth, rebuilding of all the wear items like seals, gaskets, and bearings, and then the final assembly into the final product. Here at the beginning of the first stage, our job is to survey the motorcycle, use our imagination to plan out the build, order parts, and strip it down to the bare bones, or as far as we need to in order to mock up the parts and build it in the second stage. This is kind of a sad moment, guys. This Airhead, that's what they call these old Beamers because that's the only method by which the cylinders are cooled. This Airhead has spent the last 44 years of its life with all of the factory accoutrements, loved and unmolested by several wonderful owners. But not for long, suckers. Time to shred this baby apart into a million pieces and throw all the stock parts into a dumpster behind the old Kmart. Okay, it won't be that extreme. I'll try to sell some of these stock parts that are in great shape to help keep other people's stock bikes on the road. But as for me and my bike, we will serve the Lord of motorcycle builds and take it all apart and build a sweet custom old Beamer. Disassembly went fairly smoothly. There is a learning curve, however, being that my primary experience is on vintage Japanese bikes. Now, all motorcycles have parts and systems that accomplish the same goals, but the Japanese and the Germans of the late 1970s reached those goals in very different ways. Sure, it's all nuts and bolts and any monkey can take something apart or smash it apart, but when you've spent the last 15 years building Japanese bikes that only use 10, 12, or 14 millimeter wrenches, then all of a sudden you realize the Germans threw in 11 and 13 mil fasteners just for fun. You can't help but pause. Now, I remember when I was in middle school, so this was between 1998 and 2001. I had a portable compact disc player. CDs, they called them. Now, just for fun, I went into the basement, rummaged through my dad's red Craftsman toolbox. You know, the one that had like 2 or 3 drawers in the top that opened up, right? Every dad and grandpa of the age had them. And I rummaged around for some tools. And then I sat at the desk and I took that little CD player apart. Why? Because I thought it'd be fun. I had no idea what I was doing, and it never went back together. But there's just something satisfying about it, right? A 1979 Airhead, newsflash, is so much simpler than a cheap CD player from 1999. Trust me, you can do this. I would even go so far as to call this type of work sort of zen and meditative, mindless work. You can just zone out and enjoy the process. Limited mechanical ability, and limited tools even, can get you far with these old bikes. Although you're seeing several hours of work disassembling, cataloging, and Ziploc bagging an entire motorcycle, even more hours were spent on the World Wide Web, deciding what parts to order, what styles, colors, and manufacturers to use. Those are the real tough decisions, and the ones that take tons of time. But when you do this enough, you start to have a few manufacturers that you keep going back to and types of parts that you like to use over and over. But again, these old Beamers are far different than the old Japanese bikes I'm used to working on. But I'm thankful for the opportunity to learn new things and expand my knowledge and skills. This is a great project. I can't wait for you guys to see what I have in store for this R65. The easy part is over. Any monkey can take off nuts and bolts. The hard part's next, right? Fabricating, building, putting this together exactly how we want it. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, you're special. You're special because I looked at the analytics the other day and something like 98% of people that watch my videos aren't subscribers. If you've made it this far, it's for a reason. So please go down and hit that subscribe button so that I can keep coming out here, hitting the record button as I build and work on these bikes in the shop. Thanks. We'll see you next time.